When you think of American cars, you think of old 50s bellhops, maybe even a little bit of old rock and roll from the 70s. And you often think of gas-guzzling big engines that don't make a lot of power and can't turn right. It's all big V8's and blowers that stick out of the hood and, well, a loss of hearing after about 5 minutes. But today, folks, here on Car Rant, I want to show you that we have been lied to about American muscle cars, and more specifically, the culture around them. Today, I'm going to show you there's more than meets the eyes with muscle cars. What's up, everybody? My name is Nick Lanza. This is Car Rant, and if you're new around here, we do builds, we do reviews, and then we have candid conversations about cars and car culture like what we're doing today. So if you like what you're hearing and like what you're seeing, please hit the like and subscribe button, and let's dive in. Many people would argue that muscle car culture is all about going fast in a straight line, that quarter-mile time. And unfortunately, in a lot of places, that's still very true. We're not going to deny that at all. When you have movies like Grease showing off a race in the LA River or Dukes of Hazzard, it just shows that a lot of people associate muscle cars with the 50s, 60s, and 70s, predominantly the 60s and 70s, and going fast, going straight. But for me personally, I would actually argue that muscle culture got started as early as the 30s with the hot rodders. You see, a lot of the guys back in the 30s that were modifying their big old V8s were in fact bootleggers. And this is actually the origins of where we got NASCAR from. They would take their cars and find ways to trick out the carburetors and engines to make them go even faster than the police. That way they could, well, very quickly run from them when they were making their illegal deliveries of stuff like hooch and moonshine. This, to me, was the beginnings of muscle culture, because we've got the big V8s, they're American cars, the Deuce Coupes, all of that, and we're going fast. But the difference was, we're not just driving in a straight line here. These guys were often racing on dirt roads and mountains and back creeks and any kind of B road you could think of in these cars to get away from the police. They were truly off-roading in some instances just to make sure that their delivery of their very illegal and much sought after moonshine could make it home. This is the Prohibition era. The era when alcohol was ironically more popular because it wasn't allowed. And also ironically, when you think about American car culture, this love of alcohol kind of still goes hand in hand with it, as many guys at big old muscle car shows often have a beer or whiskey in hand that I've seen. This humble, rather rebellious origin, in my opinion, of the muscle car scene really helped showcase that it wasn't just about big power, but about making the car better. Truly the beginnings of tuner culture as a whole. And of course, this tuner culture would end up making billions of dollars over time because new companies would be founded, guys would get better ideas, there would be special one-off variations of cars because these guys would get their hands on them and tune them up and sell them back, like, say, Carroll Shelby. And frankly, without these very rapscallious pioneers, we wouldn't have, well, stuff like automotive YouTube today, as most of the content on this platform really isn't about auto news or discussions, but about how to modify or fix or repair your car yourself. So while yes, Hollywood really puts forth this idea that American cars are about going fast and big engines, big sound and all this, there is more to it. In fact, some people forget that these cars are actually fairly good at drifting. To give a great example, we all know about Ken Block's Unicorn and how that thing is just a god tier Mustang. It's capable of tons of power, going sideways, it's twin turboed, it's amazing. But he's not the only guy out there to ever touch this as a potential platform. In fact, in movies like Bullet, where they showcased the fastback, there was some street drifting involved, where he's chasing after the perps. There's examples of good showmanship of a muscle car not just driving straight, but actually handling fairly well for what it was. And of course, years back when we talked about hyperdrive, there was the example of someone drifting a Dodge Charger on track. To get out of drifting and maybe into some dirt, there's obviously the many dirt tracks that are around the country that aren't nearly as popular as, say, the, nice pretty ovals or other types of more enduro style racing, but there was plenty of muscle cars doing dirt track racing, and in fact my own grandfather was a part of that. It's the whole reason the 351's going into my pickup truck. And speaking of enduro style racing, you've also got IMSA, you've got Le Mans, you've got these other platforms where frankly muscle engines are out there doing it. And let's not forget that some of the fastest cars in the world didn't just drive straight on, say, the Bonneville Salt Flats. They in fact had to make turns, and that would be the Dodge Daytona. The Superbird was just a perfect example of what good engineering could do for a car at high speeds to maintain grip and control. Something that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to muscle cars. Now granted, a lot of these examples are of older muscle cars because, well, the heyday of muscle was truly the 60s and 70s with outliers before and after. And I would say that the modern muscle scene still embraces that mentality, that performance index. Because you had guys like Garage 56 going out there in a Camaro and actually showing the world that, hey, we still got it. That American muscle cars can still perform and can still do some of the crazy stuff you guys do. It's why some of these police cruisers throughout the entirety of the United States are in fact variations of muscle cars. Even some of the newer cars that are coming out today that are now unfortunately not going to have these big V8s in them are still going to have some pretty amazing engines offered to them. I, for one, am still actually excited for the Hurricane engine that's supposed to be coming out, the straight six that Dodge is going to, because really, even though it's a step back from a V8 and they won't have nearly the same displacement, for me as someone who knows my cars, I know that the slant six that was out back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s was still a viable option. Sure, it's not a 440 mag, which is my favorite engine of all time, but hey, they're still keeping their roots a little bit with that, and oh, it could make big power potentially? This could be good for us. I know that here on this channel we focus a lot on the Japanese and the Euro, and that's frankly because it's what we love and what we're used to. It's what we know really, really well. But we refuse to forget that all of us started with American muscle cars. Some of my favorite cars of all time are old Mopars, because again, I had to be counter to my dad. He was a Chevy guy. I am much more of a Dodge fanboy. The Hemi is a cool motor. I love it. I think it sounds awesome when it's done right and you don't just put a straight pipe on it. Muscle culture, in my opinion, is as American as apple pie. There are other countries that do things that are very similar to us, but they still have more of that refinement to them. They don't have that fat cam and lope like a lot of our engines do, just even out of the door at factory. Yes, some of the old motors from back in the day did make a lot of power, but very easily you could make a lot of power. I mean, just the example of the 351 that's going into the Mighty Max, that makes maybe 150 horsepower on a normal day, but you change out the cam, you put in slightly higher compression pistons, and suddenly we're making 500. It's not that hard. And in fact, now we've got muscle cars and sports cars coming out of America that make well over 500-600 horsepower and can still handle pretty well. The trick is you got to know how to balance the needle a bit and not go nuts. You see, unfortunately with social media, it's really started to showcase some of the bad sides of car culture and glorify them in not great ways. We've talked about takeovers here on this channel. We've talked about the crowd killer Mustangs and the idiots at streetlights and everything else with Chargers. It's sad because these cars were so cheap and affordable that anybody could buy them, but also meant that anybody could buy them. With cheap and affordable power, it meant that the less than savory individuals were going out there and doing things with these cars that, frankly, nobody should really be doing. Yes, some of us love to have fun with our cars. We go to back roads and we have a good time. But some of these people were getting into these cars for attention seeking and creating a bad narrative behind some of these cars, to the level of some clubs are straight up not allowed to attend some of these bigger car conventions because they're afraid of what could happen when the wrong person who owns one of these cars shows up at this event. The muscle car is a part of the identity of American automotive enthusiasm. In fact, some countries around the world celebrate muscle cars by owning their own. In Japan, for example, they have the opposite of JDM culture here in America, where they will spend tons of money to buy Mustangs and bring them over and soup them up and have this almost counterculture to the Japanese enthusiasm found here in America for the American cars. It's pretty cool, actually. So yes, as much as American pop culture might want you to think that muscle cars are only for going straight and dragging on the street or something to that effect, there's so much more to these cars than what people give them credit for. And for someone that's new to cars, outside looking in kind of situation, they might be dissuaded because they might think, oh, these cars must not handle all that well, or they must not be that great of a performer, or it must be considered low-hanging fruit, like some people say online. When the reality is, it's American. It's part of us. And without it, most of the automotive world would not be the same. And in fact, some companies would probably not even exist had it not been for those crazy idiots way back in the 30s trying to run away from the police. After all, there's something primal in all of us that loves the sound of a good, throaty, healthy engine. No matter if you're into Euro cars, Japanese cars, or American muscle, or anything in between, there's a level of respect that's given to the sound of the nice, throaty V8. So that said, what do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you think that the media has really portrayed muscle cars as just a one-note type of vehicle? Or are you like me and the rest of us here at Car Rant that think muscle cars have their place but can do so much more than what is expected of them? Let us know down in the comments section. If you own one, tell us about it down below. We'd love to hear some of the stories. After all, we here love sharing automotive stories, stuff with the cars of the past. After all, that's why we got the wall behind us. So tell us about it, man. We want to hear your story. All of that said, thank y'all for watching. God bless y'all, and we'll see you on the next episode of Car Rant. Peace.